Hey guys, first video for you guys for animal science, but I wanted to give you a little picture of the reproductive tract and talk about the reproductive system. I know you've done a lot of notes and PowerPoint stuff and not a lot of visualization, so this is what we would have been doing if we were back at school. I have a reproductive tract here. We would get it out and look at it. This is a female tract. I do not have the male. And then I also would have had a guest speaker come in, Joel Frankie, who's actually an AI technician. So I'm going to end up doing all of the information today for you. So we're going to start with the female tract. And one thing, if you notice, they talked about the estrus cycle. So the estrus cycle in animals is cyclical, okay, different than humans. You know, we still have a cyclical estrus cycle, but animals are different in that they are only receptive to the male at certain points, okay? Also, we're looking at a cow reproductive tract, so their cycle is 28 days versus a human cycle is 21 days. I'm sorry, I've got that big step. Theirs is 21 days, a human's is 28, so a week difference, okay? Interesting enough though, gestation period is very similar between a cow and a human. Cows are 280 days, humans are closer to 270, okay, 9 months. So anyway, we're gonna take a close-up look at this, and then I'm gonna also bring in the estrus cycle, also talk about AI, or artificial insemination, versus natural breeding. So looking at the female tract, we're going to start where the egg is released, and that's the ovary. This is actually a reproductive tract from a cow that's been preserved. Got it from NASCO. So the egg is produced here. This is the ovary. Very coarse tissue, you know, to protect it from disturbances. But the eggs are produced there in the ovary. Now, when we talk about the cycle, we also have to talk about hormones. You know, what makes the egg to be produced or to cycle? So with the egg being produced, there's a hormone called FSH, which stands for follicle stimulating hormone, and that triggers the egg to be produced, or actually to be released from the ovary. I shouldn't say released, to be produced in the ovary. Okay, follicle is where the egg is produced. Okay, so that stimulates it. What actually gets the egg to break off is called prostaglandin, so another type of hormone. Okay, but that is actually from the brain that stimulates that, from the pituitary. So FSH and prostaglandin are signaled from the brain. So once the egg is released, it's going to travel. And it's actually first going to be caught by the infundibulum, which is a funnel that surrounds us, which is not real easy to see in this tract, okay? But it's right around the ovary. And once it goes into the funnel, then it's going to travel to the oviduct, okay? So the oviduct is right here. You can kind of see that. There's some kind of spider webby looking type stuff there, but the oviduct is this tube here. And the oviduct is where fertilization takes place. So the egg has to travel that far. The sperm has to travel all the way from either the vagina or right past the cervix. And we'll talk about that, why that's different. Okay, but this is where fertilization takes place, or the union of the egg and sperm. Once it gets fertilized or not becomes fertilized, let's say it's a fertilized egg, it's going to travel into the uterus, and in the uterus we have what's called the uterine horn, so that's both this side. I should mention there's an ovary over here, there's a right and a left ovary, and it alternates between the two during ovulation. So let's say in this case the egg gets fertilized, what it's going to do is travel into the uterus, and it's going to attach to one of the uterine horns. And that's where it's going to grow and develop for 9 months. It's going to stay just in the uterus, which is this part. Okay. Once it's reached its time and it's ready to go through birth, the cervix, which is right here, is going to start contracting. Okay, and that's going to get very large, it's going to dilate, and that's where the calf is going to pass through. Here's the vagina, it's going to pass through there, and then out through what's called the vulva. Okay, and that's what the opening is in the reproductive tract. Okay. One other thing I should have mentioned, so in the meantime, during this pregnancy, there's also another hormone being produced by the ovaries, and that's called progesterone. Okay, so that one's produced by the ovary. Another one I forgot to mention is estrogen, and estrogen is the common name for the female hormone, or the female hormone, and that's what's going to help regulate the ovulation cycle, or estrus. So we have a couple ways to look at estrus. We have an estrus cycle, okay, where all these things are interacting, the hormones, the egg, and then we also have what we call estrus, which is the heat period. And that's when the female is receptive to the male. Okay, otherwise they're not when we talk about animals. So let's say we've got this egg traveling up here, oviduct, it does not get fertilized. So what's going to happen, it's going to continue traveling out until it gets released. And that then would leave what we call over here a corpus luteum, CL, or a yellow body. Okay? And what's going to happen then is the whole cycle is going to start over again. There is one other hormone I forgot to mention. The prostaglandin actually deals with the corpus luteum, or CL. LH is the luteinizing hormone. That also is what helps with the release of the egg. Okay, so for cattle, the time period that this all occurs is 16 to 18 hours. So what happens is the female is going to start going into heat, and that means this egg is being produced, FSH is being produced, and it goes through all these signs, like the cow might be ornery, might be a discharge from the vulva. The other thing is they would mount other animals, or they would stand to be mounted. So when we look at using artificial insemination, those are the keys that we look for, is when that animal should be bred. When are they in standing heat? Okay, and then they figure 12 hours later. So you're going into heat. The hormones are being produced. Let's say again they don't get fertilized, or the egg does not get fertilized. They're going to go out of heat and basically live a normal, happy life for the next 18 days before the cycle starts all over again. Okay. So a little bit on AI then. So I mentioned about, let's talk about natural breeding first. So when the male breeds the female, the area where the sperm will be deposited is in the vagina. Okay, different than when we talk about AI. Okay, so with AI, we're going to use a breeding gun. We're going to simulate that with a piece of wire. And what's going to happen is the person who's called the artificial inseminator is going to get a straw of semen, and that's what they actually package it in. So pretend this is a straw, it has semen in. They put that in the breeding gun, and then they put a cover over it that's called a sheath to protect the animal from infections. Also, this is a little bit pointy to protect from going through, not that they would, because this is pretty strong tissue. And then basically the inseminator is going to put their arm in the cow, and the other hand is going to have our breeding gun. They're going to go in through the vulva, through the vagina. I forgot to mention, this is the bladder. I'm going to stay out of the bladder. And then up to the cervix. And the cervix is a very tough, coarse material. And that's because that's kind of acts as a plug and as protection for the developing fetus. Okay, it keeps, actually a plug seals on that if that egg gets fertilized. So it keeps things out of there. So basically it's almost kind of like a little puzzle in here. If you notice, right now my wire is right here. I have not gotten through the puzzle. Now I just did. You kind of have to maneuver your way through so that the wire end is right here. So now I'm in the uterus, and that's where the sperm is going to be deposited in artificial insemination. So there's a couple advantages to that. One is that the sperm is now here instead of way back here, so it has a less of a way to swim. And many do die, as they're trying to swim up to that oviduct, to that area of fertilization. And it only takes one that has to get there for fertilization to occur, but it is a very long way that they have to go. Little bit on numbers. So pretend again this is a straw of semen, there are 20 to 30 million sperm cells in here. Okay, it only takes one. If a bull would fertilize this cow naturally, he would deposit 2 to 3 billion sperm cells. So it's almost kind of a waste because only one is needed for fertilization. But because it is so far away and several will die, it's nature's way of making sure that one will make it there. The other thing with AI, then some advantages besides this aspect, another advantage is that it's a lot more sanitary, less chance of, almost no chance of the animals getting reproductive diseases because all of the semen, once it's collected, is tested for diseases. And then the other thing, they can actually break down and not put as many sperm cells. So they can basically use a bull's semen for many, many females. So that's why it's become a big business. There's AI companies, they might own 100 bulls or more, but they can service thousands of cows because of all the collections. Wanted to show you a picture how they store the semen. So you see a farmer might have one of these themselves. This is called a liquid nitrogen tank. And basically that's what they store it in. Otherwise, a person that's an AI technician, they would store the semen in there. And basically, liquid nitrogen keeps it cold. It keeps it down to negative 320 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay? And then what happens is before that semen gets put in this gun, the inseminator or the farmer takes it out, they thaw it in a 95-degree water bath, and then they put it in the gun, so it's about the temperature, a little bit cooler than the body temperature of a cow, which is about 101 degrees. But semen basically can be stored indefinitely in here. It can last forever. Liquid nitrogen, again, people that use it, you have to be careful because it can frostbite you very quickly. But this is a typical tank. One other piece of equipment, I didn't get it out. I have one of these, but inseminators, I only have these gloves on. Remember, they'll have a long sleeve because they do need to put their hand into the rectum of the cow to be able to figure out, where this gun is and where to deposit the semen. Let's see, am I missing anything, Josh? If you guys have any questions, I'm going to try and find a video too showing maybe how they collect semen. In the dairy industry, that is pretty big. Other areas like pigs, it is used somewhat, not as much. Horses, again, not very often, might be with the very expensive racehorses. Sheep and goats, they don't use it hardly at all. But one industry where they have to use it is turkeys. And the reason for that is the domestic turkeys, because they're so big, the males are too big actually to naturally fertilize the females. So it is used a lot in that industry too. But dairy, it is. And another reason besides safer, you don't have to keep a bull around. Another thing is that you can get a lot of different genetics. You can change genetics of your herd a lot quicker if you're using different sires, okay, or fathers. Sires is a term we use for fathering. The dam would be the term for the mother. So hopefully that was a little bit helpful explaining a few of those notes. I know there's a lot of them. I probably didn't do the estrus cycle quite as good, but there is that cycle that continually goes on. Animals, you don't necessarily see like a period like you do with humans, but they do have some discharge when the egg does get discarded, okay, when they're not pregnant. So hopefully that helps you. Hope everyone's doing well. We'll probably have a short test on AI. I want to do just a little bit on breeding systems yet, because with most species we do what we call purebred breeding, where it's the same breeds. But when we talk about food animals like pigs and beef, we do also talk about crossbreeding. So I'm going to send out a couple slides that show you like a couple of different types of crosses that they might use. And these would be with different breeds. So like Angus and Hereford, or Angus and Simmental. Okay, versus dairy, there is a little crossbreeding going on right now with Holsteins and Jerseys, but for the most part, you have pure breeds that you're breeding. And then the other thing we need to discuss a little is inbreeding. Most of the time we stay away from that, but there are some instances in the animal world where they do use some inbreeding to isolate certain types of genes and stuff. So a little bit more yet on repro, and then we'll head into the different species. Start with dairy. So have a good day, have a good weekend, and I'll keep in touch.